Please welcome to the stage four-time McDonald's Monopoly Instant winner, Many Kudos!
Wow, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. It's with great pleasure that I am thrilled to be honoured to share with you a clip from our upcoming video, The Many Scandals of E3.
What's up, world?
Can we skip this?
I'm Travis Scott. This is my McDonald's order.
The year is 1995, and video games are on the verge of collapse.
Whoa, free cube.
This beautiful intersection of art and interactivity and jiggle physics, the next frontier of storytelling and human expression, reduced to yet another scapegoat in a long line of scapegoats. In the eyes of the public, violent video games and youth violence went hand in controller, and politicians were salivating at the chance to rile people up. The games industry needed to be taken seriously. They needed. E3 was an unforgettable experience, even if you'd never been. Day after day of massive announcements, live streams, elaborate booths, sneak peeks at the newest games, consoles and gimmicks, all peppered with some of the most uncomfortable moments ever broadcast to the internet. And wouldn't you know it, even the founding of E3 was a scandal. Today, two of the most popular games amongst kids are a literal shooter and a game where you can set animals on fire so that their meat comes out pre-cooked when they die. So it's easy to forget that there was once a period where video games were vilified for their violence. With gory video games like Mortal Kombat and Kirby's Race War making their way to home consoles, parents and politicians grew concerned that greedy game growers would happily indoctrinate a new generation of school shooters if it meant they could sell just a few cartridges more. This culminated in the 93-94 congressional hearings, headed by Senators Joe Lieberman and Herb Kohl, who sounds like a fucking Star Wars character. Now, while the link between being a violent baby and owning gun for the original Xbox are tenuous at best, these hearings did make one valid point. Video games had no consistent rating system. This meant the moms of pre-internet America had to trust that their kids wouldn't lie about the gory nudity or full frontal violence that these consoles were now able to render in 16 glorious bits. Let's just hope little Timmy doesn't come across a man made of Lego or his fucking Winter Soldier style programming will kick in and try and pull off both his head and spine in one move. Fatality. The government gave these proto-nerds an ultimatum. Either your industry creates a rating system, or the government will, and it will probably be done badly, because it's the US government. At the time, Sega and Nintendo were in the midst of one of the bloodiest console wars in gaming history, and this rivalry spilled into the hearings, with goody two-shoes Nintendo boasting about how they required Mortal Kombat to replace all the blood with cum in their version, unlike those charlatans over at Sega. When it became apparent they needed to establish a consistent rating system, Nintendo also refused to adopt the crude rating system that Sega used on their own products, as this would be like admitting they were right all along, I guess. Grow up, Nintendo. But once it became apparent that this was bigger than just them, Sega, Nintendo, and a whole bunch of other cunts all came together to create the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association. They created the ESRB, the rating system still used in North America to this day. And what a coincidence, they also created E3. You're wondering where I was going with all that shit. It was them. They made E3. Violence wasn't the only stigma orbiting video games in the mid-90s. Unlike mature, socially acceptable activities like driving home drunk from the pub at 2 a.m. or sitting on the couch watching sport all day, video games were dismissed as toys for children. This stigma bled into the consumer electronic industry, where our scrappy heroes were undervalued and underestimated. Before Sega and Nintendo peddled their wares at E3, they were peddling all over themselves at the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES. These events were hugely important for networking and enticing buyers from retailers big and small. But CES seemed almost embarrassed to include video games alongside electronic address books and back massages, opting to put them up in a tent in a parking lot nearby. Pat Farrell, head of GamePro magazine, played here by an actor, told Polygon,
They put some porta potties out there and a little snacks stand where you could pick up a cookie. Everyone was like, this is bullshit. This is like Afghanistan.
Tom Kalinske, then CEO of Sega of America, said, you had to walk past the porn section to get to the video game section. One year it was raining and the water leaked onto my Genesis machines. Oh boy. I turned to my team and I said, that's it. We're never coming back here again. And lo, Sega never did. But the remaining companies like Nintendo were reluctant to leave CES out of fear that they might not be allowed back into the prestigious event should they come crawling back with their strange furry tails tucked between their legs. How do those furries keep that tail so realistically attached to their backs? Oh. Hey! You should follow me here. Enjoy the Discord. When a meeting was arranged between CES and the game companies who were frustrated with how they were being treated, the Consumer Electronics Show basically told them,
Beta, banana, 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 ha 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 ha. But today, I want to talk to you about something serious. Look, you guys make toys. We don't really consider you consumer electronics, but you're welcome to exhibit at our show. So basically, live with it.
this was the final straw. To quote Aretha Franklin, they weren't getting any RESPEPT. Not from the government and not from their peers. They needed to change that. They needed an event of their own. They needed... yeah, not as impressive this time. I've been here for like 10 minutes now, so... It was time for pure corporate warfare. Once those consumer electronics fellas found out that the ESA had started their own event with blackjack video games and hooker video games, they suddenly changed their tune about gaming and organized their own video game exclusive consumer electronics show. While the game companies still weren't happy with the lack of respect from CES, Microsoft, Nintendo and others were unwilling to risk their spot at the Consumer Electronics Show to gamble on E3, the risky new convention. The Consumer Electronics Show's Gamer Convention was also booked months earlier than E3, which suited buyers better. So Pat Farrell, now heading up at E3, made a bold decision. They moved E3 to the exact same days. Now, everyone had to choose. They couldn't be at both. Through some aggressive PR, which proudly proclaimed every time a new company had been brought over to the dark side of E3, Paddy Farrell gradually managed to siphon more and more businesses away from CES. One day, he got a phone call from Gary Shapiro of CES, who simply said, "You win." Nintendo and Microsoft joined that same afternoon. Bitch! I see you over there. I see you wanted to equip my shirt. Yeah, I bet if we were in a neutral zone, you and me could PvP and you would try and steal it off me. Well, let me tell you, Buster, this shirt is bind on pickup. But I can tell you where you can get your own. FantasyDivision.online. We've got shirts. We've got one hat, okay? We made a tote bag for TCGs, okay? And a lock and a candle and some other stuff, okay? You go to FantasyDivision.com. You put the shirt in your cart and you buy it and I send you one. Not this one. This is mine, okay? I know we've already established you want it, but you can't have this one. You can have a similar one. One that would be almost indistinguishable, but it is different, all right? And I'm not going to lie to you. The shirt you get is not this shirt. Fantasy Division cannot guarantee that the shirt you order will be the same one worn by Kudos. If you read this, you're a little bitch. The console wars are fantastic marketing tools that encourage a sports-like backing that has turbo neats calling each other slurs and decrepit backlit forum pages over which console has the better GPU or which one weighs the most. That's my big boy! Naturally, companies lean heavily into this at E3. From elaborate booths to their fancy, well-rehearsed press conferences, these brands love to put their money on display, all in an attempt to convince you which game or console you should spend the next 3 years screaming about on Twitter. You can see why. Time and time again, we've seen brands make or break their next console, all thanks to a successful or disastrous E3 conference. This precedent was set at the very first E3 in 1995 with Sony's legendary PS1 reveal. Hey, this first one might be a bit familiar if you've seen my video on the Red Ring of Death. At the same E3, Sega shocked all with the surprise reveal that the Sega Saturn, their newest, planetiest console, would be available at retailers that day.
We're at retail today in 1,800 Toys R Us.
Hard to imagine for a company that today survives on making one good Sonic game every 10 years. But at the time, Sega were the big boys, swinging their plump chili dogs in everyone's faces. Meanwhile, Sony's big, beautiful beige brick, the PS1, was the scrappy underdog, vying for attention. And after explaining the PS1's tech and games and shit, PlayStation's US lead Steve Race waddled on stage for a brief presentation. He took to the stage, said $2.99, and then waddled off. The crowd went berserk, or as berserk as a bunch of game journalists in 1995 can get. $2.99 was the PlayStation's price, and it was a full $100 cheaper than the Sega Saturn, or around 200 Costco hot dogs in today's currency. Meanwhile, Sega's surprise early release tactic angered video game nerds who had bugger all launch titles to choose from, as well as retailers who weren't expecting it for another 4 months. I don't feel like I have to tell you how that one shook out. Mum, it was the PlayStation. They sold like 10 times more than the Sega Saturn. Funny then that Sony learnt nothing from this. 11 years later, Kaz Hirai in his stupid pink shirt took to the stage at E3 2006 to announce the PlayStation 3 and its now infamous $499 price tag, which was $100 more than its rival, the Xbox 360. Now this was also mentioned in my Red Ring of Death video, but because that focused on the Xbox 360, I never mentioned why the PS3 cost so much. You see, Sony was fighting wars on multiple fronts. While the PlayStation was up against Microsoft and Nintendo's consoles, Sony's newly minted Blu-ray format was fighting the battle for disc media supremacy against Toshiba's HD DVD. The disc boxes were even color-coded like game boxes, with different exclusives depending on which studio backed which formats. In a particularly bold move, Sony decided to include a Blu-ray player in every PS3. Keep in mind, standalone Blu-ray players were going for $1,000 at the time, so getting one in your PS3 for only $100 more than the Xbox 360 made the PS3 a great deal. In theory. As good a deal as it was, most gamers wanted their game console to play games. So having to spend $100 more and wait a year later than the Xbox 360 set the PS3 off on a rocky start. And a fun twist, this ended up being the correct move, as integrating Blu-ray into the PS3 single-handedly helped Sony defeat Toshiba's HD DVD. Despite the console's turbulent start, the PS3 would go on to sell a whopping 87.4 million units and 0 games. That meant 87 million houses with a Blu-ray player, even if they didn't buy it for that reason. For comparison, 1 month before they cancelled the HD DVD player, Toshiba announced that they had sold under 1 million HD DVD players. Yikes! Can we get Toshiba cancelled on Twitter? Now, a Blu-ray player is actually quite useful, but it was still a vestigial addition for the home media crowd, which added nothing to the core gaming experience while massively inflating the price. Wow! I wonder who could have done something like...
Now this needed to be its own segment.
What should have been Microsoft's chance to win fans back over turned into a massacre after Sony used their E3 conference to go for the throat. Now, the Xbox One didn't start on the best footing. Rumors that it would be always online had been circling the internet for months. And it's important to remember this was back when people cared about things which actually mattered. A few weeks prior to E3 2013, the Xbox One was officially unveiled at a Microsoft press conference, and for some fucking reason, focused primarily on its offering as a glorified cable box. As Phil Spencer would one day reflect, we showed things like The Price is Right, for instance. In fact, I think the very first piece of content we showed on an Xbox One was a TV show. This confused everyone, from consumers who bizarrely were expecting a game console to the people who worked on the damn thing who thought they were building a game console. It's also just funny from a marketing standpoint. Like, unlike gamers, normies who just watch TV and movies aren't tuning into keynote speeches about exciting new boxes they can watch television on, especially when that box is the sequel to a video game console. Hey, get this off the fucking screen, man! The dreaded always online function turned out to be mostly true, with these fucking scumbags trying to corporate speak their way into convincing you that it's actually freaking awesome to have to log your Xbox in once every 24 hours or lose access to the single player games you paid for. This is bad for a number of reasons, but even if you have a flawless internet connection, it's still a greedy, restrictive policy that punishes gamers in order to prop up a bunch of other awful anti-consumer features. All of this always online nonsense was supposedly to allow developers to create massive persistent worlds that evolve even when you're not playing, which is something PC gaming achieved with dial-up, as well as being able to access your digital library at your friend's house, which is something 3 people would have used. Gone are the simple days of buying a physical game and playing, trading, or selling it as you wish. In the proposed Xbox One Cyberpunk hell, your physical games are now just mysterious disc-shaped keys bound forever to your Microsoft account once placed inside the Xbox One's tight little slit. This convoluted announcement proudly boasts that anyone can play any games on your console, regardless of their relationship to you, which is how it's always worked. Of course, the real kicker is their policy on trading and selling games. A policy in which Microsoft has kindly allowed developers to choose whether or not their games can be traded or resold. So, just to reiterate, this would be Microsoft going to a company and saying, "Hey, do you want to make more money or less money?" Besides intentionally attacking the secondary market to prohibit third-party sales so Don Matrick can afford more first-class flights, this would have been dire news for game preservation, as well as like the way you expect purchasing an item to work. You will own nothing and be ambivalent about it. Finally, like the PlayStation had done 7 years ago, Microsoft had superglued an additional piece of technology onto every Xbox One, something that added nothing to the core gaming experience while inflating the console's price. The Kinect! Microsoft's answer to the Wii's grandma-friendly money-printing motion controls. Not only did this jack up the price for a gimmick aimed at a casual audience, it was required to run the damn thing. Even if you didn't own a single Kinect game, it is imperative that Microsoft have a camera and microphone in your living room 24/7, with a direct feed going to the digital panopticon in Bill Gates' office. So, people hated it. It's a nice reminder to the fucking ghouls in charge that at the end of the day, it's us that holds power, not them. And their blatant anti-consumerism would not go unpunished. In addition to a tidal wave of bad press and Angry Joe videos about the situation, there was a deluge of negative comments and cool 2013 memes mocking Microsoft's new, stupid home media hub. And of course, the console's name, which Microsoft hoped would be abbreviated to the monumentally lame The One, in the same way people say the 360, ended up earning the nickname the Xbone. Still, this was nothing compared to what Sony did in response, or rather, didn't do. 3 weeks later, E3 2013. This was Microsoft's chance to win everyone back. While they managed to actually show off some video games for their video game console, they did little to address or clarify their stance on trading games or being always online, despite the deluge of criticism. When they did discuss it in interviews afterwards, it didn't exactly go to plan. You might have seen this insane quote from Xbox's Don Matrick, who looks like Martin Shkreli mixed with Adam Scott, where he says,
"Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't.
It's funny, you can kind of see the exact moment he knows he fucked up. Like he'd sort of planned for this, but only realized how bad it sounded after it had already left his throat. Several hours after Microsoft's E3 presentation, Sony held their own to reveal the PS4. In a series of slides and speeches that were clearly added or tweaked to specifically call out the Xbox One, Sony announced to raucous applause, "As we make our leap into the next generation of gaming, we at Sony have decided to not do any of that shit. With no mandatory additions like the Kinect weighing it down, the PS4 was also able to undercut the Xbox One by a full $100, as the Xbox 360 had done to the PS3 just one generation ago. As a final fuck you, Sony bigwigs Adam Boyes and Shu Yoshida filmed a 20-second clip that, in contrast to Xbox's labyrinthian games ownership rules, showed just how simple it was to trade a PS4 game.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
Now keep in mind, this was before every corporation decided to act like a sassy, somehow lamer version of Wendy's Twitter. So this casual, passive-aggressive, shitposty energy felt unique and refreshing, especially coming from the Japanese megacorp. While Microsoft felt out of touch with gamers, Sony seemed more in tune than ever, and this short clip was phenomenal guerrilla marketing. After a week of constant mockery from fans, rivals, and even the US military, Microsoft caved and reversed its always online policy and restrictive game licensing rules. They also removed the requirements for the Kinect to be plugged in for the console to function, but still included one in every box at launch, perhaps trying to force it into relevancy like Sony did with Blu-ray. Unfortunately for Microsoft, the damage was already done. Microsoft stopped publishing sales numbers about a year after the console's release, which probably says something in itself. But in 2023, they finally admitted that Sony had sold around twice as many PS4s as they had sold Xbox Ones. That disastrous console reveal really put such a sour taste in the mouth of the consumer that even today, 12 years since the Xbox One was revealed, Microsoft has never been able to recapture the massive dominance they held during the 360 era. Current Xbox head and sourpuss Phil Spencer believes that this was the worst generation to lose.
This is the first generation where the big games that they're playing were games that were available last gen. When you think about Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, like the continuity from generation to generation is so strong. I see a lot of pundits out there that kind of want to go back to the time where we all had cartridges and discs and every new generation was a clean slate. There is no world where Starfield's an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5.
I agree, Phil. That shit was like a 6 at best. Today, there's a pretty clear divide between cinematic trailers, which are fully pre-rendered cutscenes that show off the story, characters, and tone of a game while featuring no actual gameplay, and gameplay trailers, which do, in theory. We even have cute little disclaimers now, telling you if it's pre-rendered or what console it was captured on, or reminders for John to call up his mum because it's her birthday today. These disclaimers are because John forgot to say happy birthday to his mum last year, and she took it really bad. And because of the massive fan backlash to a number of high-profile fake trailers, which I have, in my boundless generosity, decided to talk to you about today. You know you could be watching these videos 2 days earlier. You know you could be watching these videos with more parts. Yes, that's right. I'm now uploading extended cuts to Patreon. For only $5 worldly dollars, you could be watching my newest videos 2 days earlier. Joining these fine, handsome... Okay, not that one. And if you want to see Doplex and I commission the cameos you saw in this video, that'll be up on Patreon later this week. India Joker, baby. I'm going to give it to you straight. You're going to be a star. Head to patreon.com/manykudos. That's patreon.com/manykudos. One of the best examples of this sort of false advertising was the Killzone 2 trailer shown at E3 2005. The PS3 game swept the show with its phenomenal action-packed first-person trailer that was touted as real gameplay. If this is true in-game rendering though, and again we have no reason to believe that it's not, then Killzone 2 is definitely one of the most impressive visual demos ever to appear at E3. Now, it seems so obviously fake in retrospect. The camera and character movement is so fluid that it feels more like an arcade rail shooter, not to mention the sort of fire, smoke, and lighting effects that had no hope of being rendered in real time back then. I suppose it speaks to the optimism we had for new consoles back in the 2000s, with a large chunk of gamers, journalists, and industry professionals all thinking, who knows, maybe the PS3 can run this? With graphics killer miles ahead of anything else shown, optimistic gamers blindly believed that it has to be real, while more skeptical, fedora-wearing gamers argued that the only reason it looks better is because it's fake. Still, when pressed about the trailer, Sony bigwig Jack Tretton reaffirmed that it was actual gameplay.
Is there some stuff in there that's just, computer smoke and mirrors?
It's definitely real. I guess we're pretty good at keeping secrets because the dev kits were out there. The dev kits are very intuitive, so people did some incredible things. And that's one thing Ted wanted to make sure everybody understood. That is real gameplay everybody's seeing out there.
As you can imagine, the staff at Guerrilla weren't exactly impressed.
Watching this back home going like, no, what does he just say? Because, that's not true. But then we figured like, nobody will believe that because it's obvious that it's all rendered. And then we went online and lots of people actually did believe it. And then we were like, oh, this is not good.
In interviews done since the event, several current and former Guerrilla Games staff revealed that the trailer was not only pre-rendered, it was only meant to be used internally as a benchmark to strive for, and would also be shown privately to select members of the press to give them a feel for the kind of game they hoped to make. Apparently, Sony was so impressed by the trailer that they chose to show it to the world instead, during their E3 2005 press conference. Still, the team took this in their stride, and used the hype as motivation to help them match the trailer's lofty vision. Killzone 2 were going to be the first video game in history to be named Killzone 2 on release. While the Killzone 2 trailer was completely pre-rendered, the line between cinematic and gameplay was blurred several times in a row by... Oh, sorry, I have to climb a tower to reveal this part of the video. Ah, of course. For whatever reason, in the early to mid-2010s, Ubisoft's marketing team decided that their gameplay trailers should all lie in the most obnoxious way possible. The Division, Far Cry 4, Rainbow Six Siege, and most infamously, Watch Dogs, all featured E3 gameplay trailers, seemingly captured in-engine, with wildly advanced visuals and effects. These trailers usually feature volumetric lighting, dense prop placement, and impressive particle effects. Seriously, the fog machine in this hallway and the Watch Dogs trailer is so atmospheric. It's really, really cool. Meanwhile, the mixture of camera, particle, and audio effects make this petrol station explosion feel just so punchy and cinematic. The Watch Dogs trailer also has this car crash scene, which features what you'd assume are real-time car physics, though this also appears to be heavily scripted. You can actually see whoever's playing purposefully face away from the left road, so half the cars needed for the crash can suddenly spawn in when they need them to. So, when the game launched a year later and looked significantly different to what was advertised, fans weren't exactly moist. Critically, it still received about as many 7 out of 10s as you'd expect for a Ubisoft game, and is more or less remembered fondly today, even if fans can't help but mourn the idea of the game we were sold. Not long after the game's release, a modder by the name of The Worse found that many of the graphical improvements seen in the E3 version were still present in the game's files and could be modded back in. The weirdest part of this to me is that the actual graphics for these games are great and still hold up today. This visual subterfuge only helped erode Ubisoft's increasingly rocky reputation. But if I've learned one thing, it's that the internet is not real life. For every person complaining on Reddit about how scummy this is, I'm sure a dozen people saw these souped up trailers while sitting on their couch, mouth agape like the Quagmire toilet, and managed to rub their 2 brain cells together long enough to think, I need to buy this game. Unrelated, but this was the same time that Ubisoft felt the need to add these painfully scripted casual conversations into their trailers.
Whoa, it's another group of players. Brace for PvP.
Now you can finally imagine what it would be like to play Ubisoft's new third-person shooter with a diverse team of the most boring cunts on the planet. Anthem's E3 2017 reveal trailer requires at least a brief mention. With the game still in pre-production when it was revealed, this optimistic trailer took wild swings at what they hoped it would look like on launch. This isn't uncommon, of course, with most reveal trailers coming out years before the game actually does. So some changes in design are to be expected, within reason. Blizzard, you better add in dance studios. But as you can see in Nick 930's fantastic comparison video, the E3 trailer missed the mark in many ways. Like most of these fake trailers, it featured realistic lighting and shadows, but also implied the sort of scale and draw distance you only see in modded Minecraft videos. Unfortunately for Anthem, it A, looked sick, and B, massively overestimated what would be possible. These lofty expectations, BioWare's indecisive management, and the dreaded Frostbite engine saw its 2019 release crash and burn like a truck carrying hot tar driving into a kindergarten. After releasing two middling reviews, there was hope that BioWare would pull a Final Fantasy XIV and patch their way out of a shitty launch. Unfortunately, in early 2021, these hopes were squashed like a kindergartner being hit by a hot tar truck, when it was announced that development on Anthem had been halted indefinitely. Quick honorable mentions. Aliens Colonial Marines showed off its fancy alien AI at E3 2011, but then Randy Pitchford stole all the fucking money to make Borderlands 2 and Duke Nukem Forever. A simple syntax error ruined the whole game's AI. Whoops. No Man's Sky. An indie studio's ambitious title that had its hype train fly off the rails after being picked up by Sony. The trailer was the great Implio-Matrix, giving you the impression that you could do much more than you really could. Sometimes you need to start a forest fire to nourish the ground, and after being scorched by, everyone, Hello Games turned that reputation around by releasing, as of time of writing, 1 billion updates. E3's death was like watching someone slowly wither away, being diagnosed with a new major ailment every few years before being unceremoniously obliterated in a nuclear blast. While COVID was the obvious death of E3, its issues had been compounding long before we started sipping bat soup lattes. The prickliest problem for the companies presenting was primarily the cost, both in terms of man hours and cold, erect cash. This was easy to justify in the 90s and 2000s when it was the premier event for showcasing games, consoles, and ladies' midriffs to retailers and journalists. But the importance of the retail buyer began to wane in the 2010s as online distribution hemorrhaged business away from physical retailers. E3 was also too late for the buyers who did attend, who much preferred to plan their Christmas orders way earlier than June. The internet would also be the death of E3's other major draw, the press. In the before times, journalists would attend E3 to sample upcoming games and chat with devs. Also, they could report back to Total Gamer or Cube or GameSpot and tell eager fans how to spend their clams. With the rise of social media, fans now had a dedicated line to their favourite developers and publishers, who could now directly share trailers and information with them without arbitrarily waiting for June and without wasting a bunch of time and money fluffing up games journalists. This was quite a substantial amount of money, by the way. In a GamesIndustry.biz interview with Peter Moore, he states, it was in the tens of millions of dollars, whether that's building out the booth or attending. In those days we were taking 300, 400, 500 people to E3. But also you had to look at the productivity cost of taking people away from their day jobs for months to work on booth development, marketing tools, digital assets, everything. Still, cost wasn't the only factor. With the retail and journalism sides of the event quickly losing relevance, many companies like EA were keen to open the trade-only show to the public. After all, one random jackoff making a viral tweet about your game was starting to become more valuable than some games journalist's verbose article. This put them at odds with E3, who were unwilling to commit to a full-blown public convention, and for good reason. The way you plan a trade show for industry professionals who are paid to be there is vastly different from a convention for fans who paid to be there. And E3's inability to juggle these competing viewpoints would ultimately be its doom. When EA couldn't convince E3 to let fans join their 2016 presentation, they up and left entirely. Others, like Nintendo, continued exhibiting on the floor at E3, but opted to host their own pre-recorded digital presentation instead of a live conference. Smaller companies were slowly but surely leaving as well, struggling to justify the massive costs and meager returns. In just 2 years, the show went from 293 exhibitors in 2017 to 209 exhibitors in 2019. This would also be the first year since the show started in 1995 that Sony would choose not to exhibit. They now hosted their own private event for buyers in February and announced games whenever they wanted on their social media, leaving E3 with little to offer them. 2019 would also see the ESA, the company behind E3, embroiled in many scandals. Morale was at an all-time low, largely in part to disgraced President Mike Gallagher, whose cruel leadership techniques most likely earned him the axe in 2019. Things went from bad to worse when they accidentally published a list containing the private details of over 2,000 journalists, influencers, and attendees of E3 2019 to their public website. Naturally, this led to a spike of death threats and harassment, to which the ESA said, "Sorry, I'm real sorry, mister. Mister, I'm real sorry about you getting the death threats. It's a real shame." The companies exhibiting at E3 already felt the ESA was struggling to accommodate their needs, and these blunders would only further erode their trust. E3 2020 was shaping up to be some kind of corpo hellscape with emphasis on influencers and celebrities taking part in exclusive/appointment-only activations for select attendees that will create buzz and FOMO, which would have been really fucking funny to watch. If you want to see a visual comparison of a fan convention compared to a trade show, look at the floor plans for their 2018 floor and their proposed 2021. Whoa, I can't wait to check out Experience One and advance the industry's brand with consumers while storing positive shits for future use. Fuck it, who knows? Maybe this would have been just what E3 needed to stay relevant enough to stick around for a few more years, but we'll never know, because E3 2020 never happened. After cancelling the show in mid-March due to lockdowns, they claimed they would host a virtual event instead. But with only 3 months to throw this together, and the world as a whole still unsure just where this whole COVID thing was going, they would ultimately bin this idea a month later. Of course, capitalism groans on no matter how many grandmas are getting turned into worms, and the companies that would have exhibited at E3 2020 still had shit to announce. Nintendo and Sony were already doing their major announcements digitally, and it wouldn't take long for everyone else to throw together their own. E3 would return in 2021 as a free, fully virtual event. While they still featured a lot of heavy hitters like Microsoft, Nintendo, and Ubisoft, the lack of a physical event made it indistinguishable from the dozen other virtual events thrown by publishers, publications, and Jeff Keighley. At this point, E3 had become incredibly hard to justify. After everyone was forced to set up their own digital presentations back in 2020, it seems easier to just do that again without being shackled to E3. On top of that, the video game industry exploded over COVID, as your only options in lockdown were playing video games, playing with your little beast, or becoming a YouTuber. This explosion happened despite E3's absence in 2020, making it very, very hard for the money men to justify throwing tens of millions of dollars and thousands of hours of blow power at the next one. After cancelling E3 2022 over COVID and struggling to generate enough interest, the ESA announced in December of 2023 that E3 wouldn't be returning ever. I don't know, kind of sad. It's turned Summer Games Fest and the Game Awards into the de facto gaming events of the year. So I hope you like Jeff Keighley. Just kidding, Jeff, I think you're alright. You seem like a nice guy. But despite its flaccid demise, E3 had done its job. From its beginning in 1995 to its end in 2021, gaming couldn't be in a more different place. During the 93-94 Senate hearing on video game violence, Tom Kalinske, head of Sega of America, had to explain that video games aren't just for kids. They scoffed. They couldn't believe it. Are you kidding me? Everyone knows video games are just children's products. You shouldn't be doing these aggressive things. and they basically tossed me out of their offices in DC. 30 years later, and the video game industry is bigger than the NFL and Hitler combined, bro. That's insane. The presence of a major trade show like E3 was crucial in legitimizing my favorite hobby. And despite all its flaws, E3 will forever hold a special place in my heart. Miyamoto, play us out. Okay, well, that was actually just the whole fucking video. Yeah. Well, guess you don't have to watch it anymore. Guess you don't have to buy it anymore.
Hey, thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you're after some more content, I just dropped a brand new video on my second channel where I review Steam games with 0 reviews. Otherwise, why not check out the Mini Scandals playlist?